Hello and welcome. Wow, full house, look at that. Thanks guys for coming to Storytelling in VR. We've got another amazing panel. Unfortunately, Andrew had to drop out at the last minute, so we're gonna cruise on without him, but I know he really wanted to be here. So apologies about that, but let's jump right in. So I'm gonna give you guys just a little bit of background. We've got a really all-star panel. Andy Cochrane over here from Mirada Studios is the digital and interactive director for Mirada, which is a creative studio co-founded with none other than Guillermo del Toro. And the majority of his projects and experiences are created for the Digital Interactive Group, which focuses on combining the company's passion for storytelling with new technologies in all different types of medium, including virtual augmented reality apps, installations, the web, etc. Let's have a big round of applause for Andy. Cool. Cool. And Annie Lukowski is the co-founder of Vanishing Media, a virtual reality production company where she brings her passion to storytelling, for storytelling, to narrative cinematic filmmaking. And Annie has created content for new media platforms and silver screen alike, from co-founding a branded entertainment company, Working Bug, to her successful work in the advertising space with some really top-end brands, and her acclaimed short films and work as an independent film producer. Let's please give her a very warm round of applause. And then we have Bryn, who is co-founder of Ryot. And Ryot is an immersive media company based in Los Angeles with a virtual reality studio that is one of the most prolific in the country for 360 content. Bryn has overseen the production of over 60 VR films. I read that, I was like, oh, how the hell did you do that already? Maybe you could tell us about that. 60 VR films that Ryot created, some of the most with some of the most well-known brands in the world, including global VR news partnerships with Huffington Post, Associated Press. Bryn has also produced award-winning documentary films, including Body Team 12, which is nominated for a 2016 Oscar in the category of Best Documentary Short. And before starting Ryot, Bryn spent his years as a humanitarian aid worker, serving in the Peace Corps in Africa and working in Haiti, where he helped build the country's largest secondary school in Port-au-Prince, which now educates more than 3,000 students per year. So let's have a warm round of applause as well for Bryn.
Thank you.
So 2015 was a really big year for storytelling in VR, right? A lot of things happened. A lot of what I guess we would consider the dawn of real cinematic VR happened in 2015, arguably, and all of these a lot of experimenting and a lot of pioneering efforts. And I was wondering if you guys could each kind of go down the line and talk about your experience in 2015 relative to where you're going now. What you feel like you learned, because I know there's been a tremendous amount of sort of banging into the walls, not only with the technical requirements of the medium, but also just the unwritten conventions.
Okay, I will start. I think the technology is still rapidly evolving, and because of that, it's first and foremost a strict parameter that you're working with, and I think that's what 2015 really opened my eyes to. That we had all these grand things we were going to do, and then we're like, nope, actually it's a lot harder to shoot stereo than you hope. It's a lot harder to do that, but just seeing the Samsung Gear go from $250 to $99, I'm talking about something that shouldn't affect us, but it is. Because right now, our biggest challenge is there's not enough content out there, so people are not going to buy headsets. If people don't buy headsets, they're not going to fund our movies. So there's a little bit of a situation there. So I'm seeing all of these great technology advantages coming down the line. I see that Ozo would have on-set monitoring, because I like you mentioned, I mostly come from traditional entertainment. I went to USC. It's a very direct-to-camera type of location, and you have close-ups, and you have coverage, and I do a lot of comedy, working with great comedians, and You have insert shots and things like that, and you just can't do that in VR. You can't insert on your watch. You can't have like a shot where the demon's, pulling off the hood. Yeah, we shot this horror film this summer. I'm getting very technical very quickly, but it's
Please do.
Yeah, but this is a great example, I think, of how you have to wrap your brain around storytelling in VR. So it's sort of a movie within a movie. When we shot the mini movie, which is just a traditional entertainment movie where this poor woman gets hacked up and killed. And she's got like a hood on her head and it's shot 2D, so off camera, somebody pulls off the thing. So we're like, okay, now the murder scene gets reproduced in VR. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't want to show the demon yet, but I need to get the hood off the person's face. And it can't just like magically go off, right? I can't do it in post because people are gonna be like, you can't see the demon. I'm like, oh right, you can see everything. Like you really forget that. And to me, those are the types of experiences that are the challenges. And I'm like, okay, now I have to totally re-envision this scene. And you end up getting more creative. Like every problem we've had has ultimately made my projects better. I don't sleep many nights just because you are doing everything all the time, but it's well worth it. And when you have these graceful, elegant solutions to something like that, which VR makes you do, since you can't trick people as much, you just become so proud.
Yeah. So when we got our first Oculus Rift DK1, there were 3 of us that kind of tried it on initially, and all of us immediately knew, like within minutes, that this was going to be a thing. That this is like, we just tried it on and it was like, how do we shoot for this? How do we did the Tuscany demo. I think that was literally the only thing that existed. And it was just immediate. We know this is going to be a thing, so how can we do it? So we spent about 2 years working on answering that question, which is, how do you shoot live action? How do you edit? How do you direct? How do you do CG? How do you do playback? Just really stupid, simple things now, looking back, that were big technical leaps. And we worked really hard to break, I'm not going to say break the medium, break the technology, break the format. We weren't trying to break it narratively yet. We were trying to break it technically. And for us, 2015 was sort of, we shot a piece for Google on January 9th, 2015. And that was the 2-year point in this journey. But that 2 years had been very focused on the technical, the workflow, the pipeline, the how. And so we hit the ground running in 2015 with sort of, we'd already like made ourselves sick. We'd already like very sick, very, very, very sick a lot of times. I can make you throw up so easily. All of you. You think you're impervious. I can give you a migraine. I can do things to you you will regret. But we did that in private. We did that on our own dime to ourselves, And so for us, 2015 was sort of like, it was year one, but it wasn't year one as in blank slate, what are we going to do? It was year one as in, we figured this out. Nobody has seen us do that yet. They don't know that we know what we know, but they're going to know soon. And so we just kind of rolled through 2015, and our focus at every step was sort of playing with the medium. Now we were playing with a medium. We'd played with the format, now we were playing with a medium. So we weren't worrying about like, how do you stitch? We were worrying about how do you shoot? How do you control attention? How do you tell a story? How do you block action? Can you do this? Can you do that? And the can you do this, can you do that were not technical questions, they were creative questions. And so we started the year with an app that is one of the most boring apps if you think about it from a narrative standpoint. It's a virtual tour. Narratively, it's a QuickTime VR Pano tour. It's 93 was when we really nailed that as a narrative form. But it as a sort of coming out to the world and saying like, this is what we can do. Shot it with Jaunt. It's stereospherical live action, which is very hard. It's multi-layered. We actually composited different takes, different passes. Stereospherical CG. Jaunt actually told us, don't do this because nobody's done it yet, and it's too soon in VR for somebody to try something that's probably going to fail. but we had already done it, and we assured them it would be okay, and it was. So stereospherical CG combined, seamlessly composited with stereospherical live action with real-time interactivity. As you're looking around, you could click and navigate around the room. There's a cool little menu at your feet, and spatial audio. So it was kind of like, we got this. This is the technology. So for us, it was really like, we'd done the homework and now it's time to play. And 2015 we got to play over and over and over. And the pieces that we did, every single one, that we tried to get something in there that was new. The strain that we did has real-time image effects. We're actually giving you tunnel vision, which is something you can't do with pre-rendered video. Things like that. We synced headsets. We got 4K stereo CG working with interactivity. So these things that are like very big, hard technical problems, for us, it was sort of time to use those as tools, not sort of like, how do we figure out that? Yay, we did it. It was more, how do we tell this story using these technologies? And, that's not to say that, like, we have, my wife and I have been together for 4 years, and she hated 2015. She hated it deeply, because I spent so many nights, like, rolling in, coming home at, like, 5 a.m., it's a hard medium to work in still. There's a lot of stuff about this. It's very, very, very difficult. But it's fun. It's really fun.
Yeah, it's so fun.
I think that, I think 2015 was a hard year for all of us too, and for a lot of relationships I don't think lasted towards the end of, certainly mine didn't, but through 2015. But, no, but what was, I think, for us, we have made, I think now it's over 100 films, and it's because we haven't slept at all. I think a lot of my team is here. They take up half the rooms. That's why the applause was loud for me. But we all are working around the clock because, we believe that we can create a whole, new genre, right? That we can be a part of what we think is a platform shift, if not the next platform shift, but it's something really revolutionary is happening. And for us, our approach is really a mobile approach, and we can kind of get into that a little bit more in 360. But our journey from it began, Ryot is a news website where every story has an action. So when you're reading about something, you do something about it. And we always are looking for how we use technology to bring people closer to the story. So we would do this action button, which allowed people to sign petitions or donate when they would read a story, when they would read about something happening in the world. And then we would use drones and GoPros, and Robert from USC and I worked on a Google Glass project that was terrible, because Glass didn't work. But the project wasn't terrible, but the technology wasn't there. And finally, the 360 and VR came along, and it was the medium that we had been looking for. We made a film, our first film premiered at Tribeca Film Festival last year. That was about solitary confinement, called Confinement with the ACLU. And we had kind of just shot that with photographs in 360 for the headset. And we had wanted to shoot in VR, but the camera at that point, which was a long time ago, like less than a year ago, was a very expensive camera that required camera operators to go with, and a lot of our shoots are international. So this was a camera that we couldn't shoot with, our journalists, because it was very expensive, very difficult to operate, and we were bringing camera operators who we didn't know could be in the field as field journalists. So it was at an after party that my friend Chadwick showed me the 360 Hero camera, which is, you guys have probably all seen it. It's the GoPros on a 3D printed case. And that was the moment that changed everything for us. That was the moment where we knew that our journalists that we have all over the world could shoot 360 in VR, right? Because it was at that point, you had to be technical, you had to know how to use GoPros, but you could fix things in the field, and you didn't need to be a specialist. So the next day after we saw that camera for the first time was the earthquake in Nepal, and we borrowed that camera. It was like a mad dash at JFK to get the camera and pass it off through security, and we almost didn't make it. And we took it and we embedded it with some humanitarians who were there, who just shot it and turned it on. And we lost one of the cameras after the thing fell over, and we released it about a week later. That was, I think, really exciting because it was a lot of people talked about it, and a lot of people were talking about the earthquake in Nepal, which was our point, and that we could use it to help raise money. Nobody really talked about the fact that there was like a camera missing in the back, and there was really bad stitching, and because like we didn't know what we were doing, and ghosting. It was more about that people got the opportunity to stand in the streets of Kathmandu, which were destroyed around them, and for the first time could experience, I think, the scale of that disaster. And about 2 weeks later, we brought it to Aleppo, Syria, and we shot inside of Syria for our next film, and then after that, we just shot everything we possibly could on it. So that's certainly been what our approach in 2015 has been, is just to shoot a lot, most of it imperfect, some of it good, some of it great, but really just to do as much as we possibly can with it.
Yeah, just to springboard off of what they were saying about the sort of the sandbox, like just figuring stuff out. Every time when we get a shoot, somebody hires us to shoot something, or we're going to do a narrative piece, like we will shoot it 4 or 5 times in our office with, like, my business partner BJ is over there, and we'll play the characters and we'll set up the camera. Like, just go out and fail. Just make some really bad, bold decisions, and you will learn some great things. And don't like worry about Red versus Alexa versus that. Like, get the hero rig, get the theta, practice, 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 because it really is. I mean, I say it's like the Matrix. Like, you have to be in there to see what it's like. When you're storytelling, it is the timing, the pacing, moving the viewer, curating the story is very different than traditional entertainment.
Yeah, absolutely. And that actually brings me to one of the big questions I have. I'm curious to actually ask the audience, among everyone who's here, how many of you guys are VR filmmakers already? If you could raise your hand. So we've got a lot of people already in the room. I want to take this poll because I want the panel to be as valuable. You know, it's really short, but I want it to be as valuable as it can be to you guys. And then how many in this room are aspiring towards actually making VR storytelling content of their own? That's maybe more than half of the room has already. That's like 70% of the room has either made something or aspiring to. So that definitely helps us in terms of our answers. That's fantastic. So I guess my big question relative to journalism, I think, is one good place to start. Obviously, it's just one of the ways that storytelling is opened up by this new medium. But I'm wondering, journalism and the news specifically, do you on the panel think that that the news fundamentally changes because of VR, or will?
Yeah, I'll start that one.
Yeah.
To us, I think that we think that everything changes, right? Like, we think that every story that we tell changes. The film that we made, the short documentary that we made that you were talking about, we shot it a year ago, and we didn't have a 360 camera. Had we had the 360 camera, we maybe wouldn't have made that documentary. We would have shot it in 360. So for us, news is a very exciting place to be able to explore. Like, sort of to your point before, what's extraordinary, I think, as a storyteller, as a filmmaker, journalist with 360 is that you can't hide behind a curtain, or you can't hide lights, or you can't really hide anything with it. So I think that for journalists, it's a really fun discussion, and it's a really interesting discussion, because then you can start getting into the ethics of it. And for me, certainly, I think that in many ways, that VR or 360 is really the truest form of cinema verite, right? It's like, it's truth. If you're using it in that way, it can be incredibly powerful, just because it records exactly what you see in front of you, and there's nothing behind the camera or behind the cameraman, or we're on our way to Iowa for the caucuses, where we'll be doing a lot of interviews, and we'll be with Bernie Sanders, and there's no, when you're sitting with an interview, you're not, just sort of like having an interview with somebody, and then there's just a giant crew of PAs and producers and people screaming behind. It's very raw, and I think that we've only just started to figure out what's possible with that. But certainly the relationship, we just did a project with Susan Sarandon in Lesbos, Greece, where she was working on the refugee crisis for the Huffington Post, and she was shooting on a Theta, you know, which is, you guys have probably seen that, that's the little handheld one. It's not it's not meant, we don't use it for the headset, you know, like that's footage that looks like the flip cam, where it's not built for that headset, but it's really great for Facebook 360 and YouTube 360, and our app and other apps like that that are mobile based. But those are cool to see because you can see her as she's talking to refugees or to migrants. You can see her asking questions and then also their reactions too. So I think that that's just the beginning of trying to figure out what that's going to look like. But certainly we're excited to explore that.
Yeah. We do not nearly as lofty journalism. We do entertainment journalism as well. So we covered like Stanley's Kamikaze and then some events from Meltdown Comics. And so, I mean, we're dealing with prop contests and kids cosplay. But at the same time, you watch this video and people really want to be there. Like the sense of presence is what VR is all about, right? It's all about being there. So where else do you want to be but in the middle of the story or at your favorite event or backstage with your favorite band? And you can still direct the story, you can still curate what you're seeing by where you place the camera, but giving people just a little freedom to feel the world, they will just get immersed in seconds.
I was going to say that there's a power of 360 video of you feel to a certain degree that you saw that yourself. And for journalism, that's a very powerful thing. And you know, for a platform like yours where you're actually trying to activate those people and actually get them to do something beyond clicking a like button, to donate, to get involved, to do something, it's going to be an incredibly powerful tool for that in terms of, you know, after the earthquake, you know, I saw what it was like in Nepal, is how people feel versus, you know, I saw on the news. So it has a potential, especially, you know, 360 video journalism has a potential to really kind of transform sort of how people feel about news events. They'll feel a little bit more engaged, a little bit more first person. But notice I say 360 video. There is a distinction, I think, between 360 video and VR. Yeah. And it's an important distinction. And there are people working, VR to me involves some form of interactivity, some form of actual, like, I'm actually interactive. Noni de la Peña is working in sort of like recreation. She's actually creating the world. She's building, you know, the environment, having, you know, basically recreating it so you get to go and experience it and you get some kind of actual interaction. That's where things start to get really interesting because that's super powerful. You know, she's got people, you know, she's made people break down in a major way, almost get PTSD. Like, you know, they saw that event, they were there. That's where it starts getting dangerous. Like when Photoshop really started becoming ubiquitous, people stopped trusting anything. You know, any photo was you know, is now questionable. Like the Snopes exists because of Photoshop and email. You know, it's so you know, it's great power, great responsibility. Everyone keeps throwing that around, but what does that mean? What that means is that, you know, it's now a tool that is so convincing because it kind of hijacks into your brain a little bit. So we're going to start getting into situations where, you know, the unintentional or intentional, you know, propaganda is a great example of intentional, but the unintentional or intentional sort of spin or bias of the filmmaker or the, you know, the journalist or the documentarian is something that really has to be carefully, you know, you have to check it yourself as a creator, and as a community, we have to kind of check it where, you know, things that are not true need to be labeled as fiction. You know, that is a fictional experience. Or we'll end up in a situation where, you know, I'm not going to get into politics, but where a certain, you know, a politician with like really radical views could be using this as a tool to prove that, you know, that their radical, you know, worldview is true, and it has an ability to sway people that might be, you know, not swayed. So it's a very, we're entering into a very sort of nebulous and powerful thing that we need to be very careful with. And I'm not saying we should tread lightly and move slowly, but I am saying that you have to be aware that there are negative potential consequences of 360 video and more sort of interactive VR content. And I think journalism is where we're going to start seeing that more so than in narrative. You know, horror as well. Horror is going to give some people PTSD. It's going to really scare the shit literally out of people. There's going to be people that will never do VR again because they have such a terrible, horrible, you know, catastrophic experience. with a piece of horror content. So, there's these like super powerful. It's a very powerful medium. You get to not just show somebody something, but actually have them experience something, and that's power. That's why we all are excited about it. But it's also, there's a flip side of that we all kind of need to be very careful.
And I think just to add one part about that is that I think that's an important distinction, sort of virtual reality versus 360. And one of the fun things I think for all of us in this room and people who are experimenting with it is, like, as you guys can probably tell, the conversations you have in 2015 around ethics or journalism or fear or PTSD or whatever, or how you shoot things, or virtual reality versus 360. Those conversations are conversations that we're all having all the time, and it's really exciting, right? Because it's also that we in this room get to write the rules or get to break all the rules. I think that's an amazing thing, right? Is that we've got this now opportunity to create the language. Like we, at Ryot in our office, we have a whole language that we've developed for how we talk about things, how we talk about video, how we talk about techniques, and everybody needs to get a booklet when they start with us about terms that we use that are different terms than any other house would probably use other than us. And I think for us, what we're really excited about and focusing on is 360 video in that way with journalism. Like, I think that the experiential VR work where you can kind of, reenactments are incredible, and they're really powerful. But we're more interested in what you're able to do with 360 video because, as we all know here, now that you have Facebook 360, that you've got YouTube 360. I don't know if you guys have seen the new Apple TV, but the 360 on the Apple TV is so good. Yeah. Our app comes out next week, but Little Star has an app on there that's killer. Yeah. But that's Facebook 360 was a breakthrough, right? Mm-hmm. I think that we put up a video there last month. It's got 13 million views on it, which is like the second most viewed, I think, VR or 360 of all time, right? It's like all of a sudden you're able to reach people at a 13 million mark that people weren't able to do 4 months ago. What's that?
That's new, yeah.
Totally new. And
4
then
months ago.
And Apple TV is the next one that's a breakthrough, because that means that every channel on Apple TV, which is everything from Nat Geo to Discovery to MTV to whoever, has now a 360 player on there. And Netflix is in the Oculus app and in the Samsung app, right? So it changes all of these conversations around something being, the HBO of VR. Well, HBO is the HBO of VR, or the Netflix of VR, and it's like Netflix is now the Netflix of VR. Like you've got the ability to see 360 on almost every AOL is about to launch, I think, next week, their 360 player on their platform too. That's incredible. Oh, am I not supposed to say that? Oh, I don't know. But that's an amazing.
There's like 300,000 people with dial-up that are just like,
But that's like every platform pretty much where video is consumed has a 360 player. So that's exciting, right? Because it means that all of us with a mobile phone
really
here
exciting.
has 360 as well.
It's really exciting, and to know that everyone is adopting it in that way, and that it rolls out. I guess you mentioned that you have a booklet, you have terms, and this is really a question for the whole class. Like, I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but if you could offer one insight in terms of 2015 and earlier, because you guys have really done so much experimenting, what have you learned that you could offer this group who's coming into this new about what works and what doesn't work, and how to approach it?
I could throw a couple. I'll throw some technical and then some less technical. There's so many things you can do. You've got control over this, over sight and sound at least of your viewer. So on a really fundamental level, rolling the horizon, and camera movement is absolutely possible. We have camera movement in most of the stuff we've done. It's absolutely possible, but sideways movement makes people sick, and everyone's like, okay, so don't move the camera sideways. It's a 360 camera. So when it's moving forward, it's moving sideways in two directions and backwards in another. So you have to be really careful. You've got, 3/4 of your directions are going to make a certain number of people sick. So you do have to be kind of careful with your camera movement. Rolling is basically the one that, like, it even gets me at this point. Like, that's just a big no-no. If your camera's on a pole and it's doing this, It's kind of like doing that. You're gonna just really make people really nauseous. And I think there's probably kind of like two really important things. Don't make them sick. That's a big one. and don't create something in which they're not the number one most important thing when you created it. Like, the camera is the audience members one at a time, hopefully in the 13 million. So you're inviting somebody to come with you one at a time, and you're gonna create an experience for that one person. That's what 360 video is. That's what VR is. The camera's them. They're gonna feel like they're standing where that camera is. So you need to think about, like, you need to talk to them. You need to address them. You need to tell them what is happening. Otherwise, you're just literally showing them home, very boring, interesting for 10 seconds, like, hey, like Coke paid us to go to Nepal and it was awesome. And here's a photo we took. Like, that's bad, but hey, come with us to Nepal. That's good. And so don't make them sick, and the camera is your audience. Treat them like a VIP. They are the only thing that matters.
And I would also add, don't hurt their necks. There's so many things where they're like, you have to play tennis, and this person's talking, and the camera's in the middle, and this person's talking, and people are like, why'd you make the video like this? Like, oh my God, poor people are getting whiplash. People say there's no frame in VR. That's totally wrong. I mean, hold out your arms, so I always do, and this is, if you can see your fingers, that's the frame, right? So that moves with you when you look. So yeah, you can motivate them to move right there, but if you have something where they can't see it, then they can't see it. So there is a frame there.
Yep.
So don't put the camera in between your two characters. Please.
I think for us, the one of the biggest fights that we have in our office internally is tripod height. So it's like, I don't think anybody's figured it out yet. If anybody knows how to do it right, talk to you. You've got it. We'll talk afterward. But I think that's something that's a real personal choice to people. I'm like around 6 feet tall, so for me, my films, I think, look higher than people who are a different height, and I'm very sensitive to low tripod heights. I don't know the answer to it, but I know that we work every single day really hard trying to figure that one out. So I would just say that that's something to experiment with and play with and see what works for you in your own films. I would say the other great trick is finding a way that you want to keep the quality as high as you possibly can. Like, part of the challenge that we all have is that, that everything downgrades quality. It downgrades when you're importing it. It downgrades on your phone. So the highest quality you can still get is, if you're not shooting on Reds, if you're shooting on GoPro, for instance, but, it's just shooting on 5Ds and doing a still image. So when there are opportunities to use still image as a trick in places that don't require action, I think that's the greatest possible trick that's out there, right? Which is like, if you don't have to see behind you because nothing is changing and you don't need that to be a moving image, then make it a still image and sort of grade into it.
Yeah.
One thing that we learned this year that was awesome, so my business partner, BJ Schwartz, is a little bit more of a gamer than I am, and he has Alien Isolation, and I don't know how many of you guys are gamers, but the gaming industry does a lot of, great things. So there's aliens and all sorts of things, and, you can essentially move them into a corner. Like, if you move in this, and they'll follow you, and you can move your camera. So if you want to test a shot, you can have storyboards right there. Like, we will use Alien Isolation to figure out how we want to have, like, what's the depth, because you need to have contrast. You know what, people close to camera, people farther away from camera. Contrast is interesting. So how do you achieve that? And there's all these great techniques in the gaming industry that you can utilize, and it's totally free. You don't have to hire actors. You don't have to stitch or anything like that. You can do a VR video right now with that.
I got one tiny other thing to add. If you're going to be producing content, if somebody's going to be paying you to be producing content, for the love of God, don't undervalue this stuff. Like, don't come in as cheap as you possibly can, because this is the Apollo program. Everything that we are making, all these VR experiences are a moonshot. Why the hell would that be cheaper than doing a commercial or doing a short film? Why the hell would be doing something that has never been done before be cheaper?
Damn straight.
So as as a community, we need to set realistic expectations. It takes longer. It's more expensive. It's harder. It's more limited. There's not as many people that can enjoy it. Like, these are realities. And trying to sort of like, you know, spin and convince and, you know, whatever, you know, trick somebody with money into giving it to you under false pretenses, you know, that, you know, it's going to be amazing. Everyone, you know, you're going to get billions of views, and everyone at home with their Vives are going to be really loving it because there's nobody at home with Vives. So, you know, we have to be realistic. Everyone should say, this is the hardest thing to create that has ever been. This is the most expensive stuff that's ever been. And I'm not saying that that's forever, but it's just, it is, a commercial in VR is more expensive than a commercial. A short film in VR is more expensive than a short film. It takes longer, it's harder. Everyone needs to, that is your mantra. Like, keep, as a group, all of us, keep banging that drum and repeating that, because the people that are out there going like, yeah, no, I don't know, you know, the commercial, yeah, they're telling you the commercial is going to be $350K. We'll do it for $50K. We'll shoot on GoPros. It's great. It's awesome. That now is a brand that will never come back, that hates VR. That's a piece of VR content that maybe millions of people will see and say, VR sucks. I saw that thing. That was awful. So just don't undervalue it. It's expensive. Keep it going. Like, if it's going to survive, it has to be good.
Yeah. Yeah, because if people see a bad piece of bad video on VR, they go, oh, I don't like VR. Like, you see a bad show and you're like, I don't like that show. But
Yeah.
you see a bad piece of VR, people say, I don't like VR. So like right now, it's so important that we all make good stuff.
Yeah, and I agree that I think that we all need to be making great stuff and elevating it. Although I don't think that we need to be overcharging for it. And maybe
Oh
we
God, no,
disagree
no,
about
no,
this.
no, don't overcharge.
Right.
Charge appropriately, schedule appropriately. I'm
Right.
not saying charge through the nose. I'm saying charge what it costs,
Yeah.
which is a lot.
But I think that
Respect
that-
how much it costs.
Yeah. I think that I mean, at least our approach is that, like, I think that advertising agencies have been ripping people off for a long time, and I think that that these ideas that all of this stuff costs so much money, it's really like a great lie to a lot of, you know, we work with nonprofits all the time, and nonprofits go and try to get a piece of any video made to advertising agencies, and they're, you know, charged hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to make content that right now everybody who has like the new iPhone and a 4K camera can make great content, right? Like, this is a moment where we all have the access to content on our mobile phones. It's like distribution is democratized, and now with the cameras on the back of it and GoPros, and means that storytelling can be democratized too. You know, I think back to 2 weeks ago, there was this Johnny Walker ad that became viral. I don't know if some of you guys saw it. It was like two brothers who are walking. It became viral when millions and millions of these things, and it was two college kids in Dublin who made that as a senior project. And I hope that after all the advertising agencies, after they had saw that and saw that it got millions of views, that in the boardroom the next day they said that we've been lying to a lot of, you know, brands or nonprofits or people, that our content is somehow so much more valuable than the content that any of us can make. So I also want to make sure that it stays in line with like, I think that we have the opportunity to start creating, you know, not only new language about it, but new rules about it too. And like, advertising is finished as we know it, and part of why it's finished is because of how much money is wasted, and that, I hope, ends, and I think it's going to end very soon. So be responsible about it too.
Cool, very balanced perspectives. I appreciate it. No, I think, look, I've been on both sides of it, so I see the truth in what both of you guys are saying, and I don't see them as contradictory points of view. I think when you're working in production and you're working on advertising things, there's a constant struggle to not be abused by a system that is extraordinarily challenging in the way that it wants you to make cheaper, make more and more for it for less and less,
Yeah.
especially when it is the moonshot moment. Mm-hmm. And some of these things are those breakthrough pieces that stick around. And then at the same time, when you're talking in terms of journalism and the truth of how sinister that ad world and the commercial side of things can be sometimes, you know, I think there is every incentive to just get out there and shoot as much as you possibly can for as little as possible, and throw caution to the wind as well. So I really appreciate you, both of your answers. So I have some other stuff I wanted to lead into about just storytelling itself, and I wonder, this is kind of the big question that's always on my mind that I'm stewing on. I don't know if it's interesting to you guys. You can yell if you don't want to hear about it. But just storytelling, the nature of storytelling itself. Like when we say storytelling throughout all time, back to like cave days. There's so much hype around VR, and it's clear that we have a much greater emotional capacity with this new medium to affect people. At the same time, though, do the fundamentals of what makes story, does that itself change because of the medium, or is that a separate thing?
No, I have a personally developed, really simple definition of what a story is. It's characters doing things. That's what a story is. And hopefully it's interesting characters doing interesting things, but it's characters doing things.
And having trouble doing it.
Well, that's a good story. And that's an intentionally very simplistic, very like low level sort of understanding of what a story is, and it's because are a film and a book sort of the same experience as a viewer and a reader? No, absolutely not. They're totally different. Book, the imagery is in your mind. Movie, there's not much left up to the imagination. But you also can't hear thoughts unless it's voiceover, etc. But VR is interesting in that, and again, we're in that 360 video versus VR split where there's not a lot of VR in the world right now. There's not a lot of like things you can strap on a headset and interact with, narrative experiences. There's an increasing number of 360 video. 360 video is definitely still a little bit in the world of film in terms of you can't touch it, you can't interact it, you can't change the filmmaker is still in control of where you stand, and what will happen around you. And you have there's ways to do it, but you don't, in general, have a lot of control over what's happening. So it is theater in the round in reverse. It is film. It's a lot of things. As we move into true VR, where people can walk around a little bit, they can pick things up, they can knock stuff over, they can leave the room while the character's talking, they can, do these things. We're going to start getting into a really interesting world where story is going to be not. The script is going to exist, but it's going to be your experience. And my story, the story I experienced is going to be very different than your story because I left the room and I missed that point. But the flowers outside were amazing, and I had this transcendent moment, and I really realized the connectiveness of man and blah 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 blah. So when we talk about storytelling in VR, we're really talking about experience design. We're talking about creating a perfect little, gooey sphere of story that the person is going to experience some amount of. And everybody's, personal sort of experience is the story. I was Harry Potter. I learned, magic, not I watched, this kid. And so story is going to become this very, hard to shove into traditional pigeonholes. It's a new thing. It's experience.
But even on I do more of traditional 360 videos, just because I come from a narrative background and I want to put on a show for you guys. One thing that I love about it, though, is that people can watch whatever they want. They can look left, they can look right, and it actually almost works as like an advantage in casting. I'm like I love directing, so I will come up with a backstory for waiter number 2. Like I will, and I do. We did a great little sci-fi piece, and it had like that. There's a family, and then there's a bunch of technicians, science guys, and they basically just fuddle on some machine for the entire 7-minute video. But people could watch them for the whole. So I'm like, so they had 2 lines, and it's hard to cast somebody for 2 lines. But I'm like, no, this is your whole story, and then you just got this job because of this, and then he's lauding it over you, but you didn't get the degree, and I go into all of that, and the actors are like, oh, give me more.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so they love it. So, And the more you flesh it out, the more you flesh out the full world, and you can't guarantee that people will see it, you know? So if in your story, the bank has to close at 5, if you have one sign that says bank closes at 5, they're not gonna get it. The people will not get it. So you have to, or you've got like an insert of the watch. You can't do an insert of the watch. So you have to change your art department and have a clock. And then you have to have all these different audio cues. So you really have to think and redesign everything and curate. You don't really curate the story, you curate the viewer's experience of the story.
Yeah, I agree, and I would also just say that, you know, for us, I think all of us, probably all of us in the room, look at this moment as, you know, a similar moment to what happened in the early days of animation, or when sound gets on film or color in film. Like, this is a moment where we have a transformational, powerful, immersive tool to start telling stories. So I think that, again, it's like up to us to tell the right stories with that too. And, you know, certainly our hope is that we use this technology and use it to try to connect the world in a way, and move it away from just shooting and killing people, which I think is like the danger of where it could go. And so, for God's sakes, don't make shooting people VR pieces, and making something that makes the world better.
There's, you know, absolutely. I don't think that every single 360 video type experience necessarily fits in with this, so this is not necessarily, you know, applies to all of them, but good experiences are ones in which you, in some way, tell the audience who they are. You are a member of this audience, and this amazing thing is happening in front of you. You are a ghost, and you have no presence here. Nobody can see you. Nobody can, you know, you are a camera. You're not actually here. This is you're watching the feed from a drone or something. But telling the audience their context, because they're going to go, I'm here. You know, it's almost like throwing a murder mystery party and then inviting somebody over, and then nobody talks to them, and they don't know it was a murder mystery party. So they're gonna spend the first couple minutes just kind of like, and you see it a lot with people that have never done VR before. They look down, oh, I don't have any body. They hold their hand out, oh, my hands aren't there. They're doing that because they don't know what they can do. You haven't told them what they can do. You haven't told them who they are. You know, the viewer has a character. They are present in this room, and that kind of ties back to what I was saying of, like, that's, you know, that camera is your audience. So just talk to them, look at them. Like, if you're gonna ignore them, tell them why they're being ignored. They're being ignored because this is a memory, and, you know, we're scientists looking into memories, or whatever the conceit is. Tell the audience who they are and what they're doing, or they're gonna spend the entire time not enjoying your content. They're gonna be trying to figure out, sort of like, understand the story and why we're here, or worse, they'll be looking for mistakes. They'll just be looking for stitch lines or gaffer's tape that got left somewhere, or, you know, an actor that's not paying attention. They're not in your story. They're sort of like, well, I was invited to this party and everyone's ignoring me, so why don't I, oh, that's interesting. So they're not part of your story. So I think that's a really important consideration as we're moving forward, is to at least tell me why I'm here. At least tell me why I'm, you know, what I'm doing. And please, dear God, don't have it be that you had an awesome trip to Nepal and and you owed the agency a couple 360, you know, panoramas.
So before we run out of time, I want to open it up to the audience. I don't know if we have hands shot up. First man right here. Do we have a microphone? We probably don't. You're probably going to have to speak up. No microphone. All right. So if you could make it nice and loud for us.
Great. First of all, thank you. And I would just like to invite you to maybe comment on some of the things I think are the biggest challenges. I think directing actors is very difficult because the complexity, it's a much bigger challenge to convince. You know, it has to be like really method acting, I think. And then on another note, what about visual effects for immersive media? Have you matching CG, all of that? Is there some advice you could give us?
It's very hard, very expensive.
Charge a lot for it. On the casting and working with actor standpoint, you know, I think it's like what I was saying. You know, just give them more to work with, And you can't do coverage in VR, so the camera is basically going to be in one or two spots. You know, we'll have somebody like at a big pivot point, but so for me, it's all about blocking. Like you've got to move. Don't have people sitting around a coffee table. Like that will kill it. I always tell everybody, like before you shoot a VR video, go back and rewatch Jaws and turn off the volume. That is some of the best blocking and choreography I've ever seen. And people will walk in and out of their close-ups into their wide shots. You know, somebody's dominating the conversation and the other person's dominating the conversation. So really, I would say more than ever, the physicality and moving your characters is the most important thing. And I think if you actually give them more business and give them more to move, it helps them hold on to their character for longer in the take, because you will have these like 5-minute takes where they're going like on this huge journey. So, you know, you have to, it really, really helps to move them.
And you mentioned sort of method acting. There are actors that immediately get it and get very excited, very, very excited, because there's a lot of really distracting things about making movies. It's a very hard thing to do as an actor. Like, you know, you're staring at, you know, an overweight gaffer eating a donut, and you're trying to, you know, like emote that I'm deeply in love with, you know, that direction. But the actors that have a theatrical background or penchant, they immediately get it. They understand it. They connect a lot better, you know, because they're not sort of like worrying about their eye line they're actually just looking at a person. So it's a little bit more theatrical. You know, you're right. The acting has to be a lot more realistic. You see through bad acting like that in VR, but that's also, you see through bad acting standing right here. If you stand where the camera's going to go as a director and just block it for yourself, don't look at it. Don't block for a headset. Get the camera literally out of the room. Stand there, block your actors, work with your actors as a human, and use your perception as a human. And like you said, you know, like blocking movement. If the camera's not going to be moving, there better be some motion, something better happening. And if your camera is moving, it's P.T. Anderson. You know, it's long shot. It's choreographed, careful. You know, really well considered blocking motion, you know, of camera and of people, and lighting, and you know, it's great. I've always loved doing long shots. I love the complexity of the blocking and I've always loved that. And now it's like, oh, that's everything. Every shot's like that.
And for me, storytelling is,
We got to get some more questions in, so we'll have to go speed round in a minute, but go ahead, please.
when you tell a story, it's not the action, it's generally the reaction that makes things interesting. It's not like we have this thing where you go pinch and he could say, ouch, I pinch, and he goes, ouch, and you're like, oh, I pinched harder the second time. That's called the pinch and ouch. It's something we use in comedy all the time. And that's where VR is great, because you have every reaction shot in the scene. Mm-hmm. And that's really like, make sure that people know, like, yeah, they're not on camera, but like, listen to what they're saying and let them know that their reaction is gonna be seen by everybody.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Got a hand right here in the center.
I just wanted to, my question kind of builds on what you were just talking about. It's kind of two different things we're hearing is, one is let the audience member be in control, tell them where they are. But we still have to tell them a story. So are you directing from a perspective that your actors are in there telling them by guiding them? Because
it's more of a lure than a guide.
yeah, because I could still want to look over here, even though the important action is here. I'm still going to want to follow the important action. And just from my own limited experience of doing like verse and seeing, being in Sudan and stuff, I realized I'm missing the important stuff. It is over here. This person's talking to me while I was too busy like doing that. So are we feeding into this ADD world that we have by doing that? How do we?
Yeah, I like to sort of undulate it. Like, I'll have times where I'm like, I'll throw every trick. light, motion, sound. Like, people look at this, right? And then I'll be like, okay, look around. You know, it's kind of cool. There's just some atmosphere, and then like more exposition. Look at this, and then let people look around. And that's directing the viewer. I say it's just as much about directing the actors as about directing the viewer, and give them a chance to look around, and then focus, and then look around, and then focus, and that really helps, I find.
And I think if you have a chance to see, many of you guys have Sleep No More, the theater, the immersive theater of the play. I think that's like the best example of live VR of what it can be.
There's actually one in LA, Delusion, that used to be a haunted house. Now they've got a year-round thing. It hasn't opened up yet, but seek it out and do it. Sleep No More is in New York City, so those of you that are LA-based, I think it's Delusion. It's original, you know, it's awesome.
We got our guy right here.
You all alluded to it, and it's a little more on the technical side, but how do you actually do the directing? I mean, do you leave the room and just like, all right, guys, go, blocking, like start at the top? Or are you the one holding the camera, trying not to be caught in stitching, or like what's some of the technical pieces?
I think just really quickly for journalism, it depends on the piece you have, right? I mean, setting up the camera and running away crosses some lines, you know, can be unethical, so it depends on kind of what story we're telling. I like, in those cases, like the work we did around the refugee crisis, all of our shooters are right next to the camera, and that's really important for us. And we're not, for the most part, for a lot of those hard-hitting news pieces, we're not painting out the tripod or anything else like that. Just that's for news.
It really depends on the project. The Google Shop one we did was designed with a locked-off camera and a multi-pass approach, so we could use lighting. And so for the primary takes, we were literally standing right behind the camera because that was all garbage that was going to get cleaned with another pass. For the strain, it was a moving camera that could see in every direction. We certainly weren't going to be trying to do. It wasn't motion control. It was just on a little self-powered platform. So in that, everyone hide. That one was hilarious because we used the second unit crew from the TV show, and one of the funniest things I've ever seen was just, "You're still in shot," and just like the AD would do this. And we're like shouting from across a warehouse, "You're still in shot!" So it depends. I mean, it depends on the project. It's some systems there's some wireless monitoring. Nokia has some nice.
I mean, even we basically use the GoPro rig, and you can sync those up with your iPhone. So I'll put my main character on one camera, and then that's the iPhone that I'll take out of the room.
Guys, this was fantastic, and I see so many hands in the audience. Don't be shy. We have to wrap up the panel, but the guys are here sticking around. We had really amazing discussion. Let's have a huge round of applause for our panelists.
Yeah, good.
Thank you.